If you've seen my presentation before, I feel sorry for you, but anyway, here we go. So my name is Alek. I'm with the Crackman Foundation Repair. I do both assessments and repairs, but mostly repairs. And I guess let's dive right into it. A lot of my customers ask me what causes a crack. There's three things that typically cause a crack. One is settlement. We're all familiar with differential settlement. Number two, differential settlement is caused by poor subgrade preparation. They don't compact it properly or use the improper soils, or they have too much, there's too much moisture in there when they try to compact it. Undermining, like if you have a walkout basement and the water's coming in from, coming against the foundation in the front, going underneath, it could pull some of the silt away, and then slowly it undermines the foundation over time. Poor soils. And number two, shrinkage. It's not a George Costanza joke, okay? So anyway, the shrinkage, that's caused by, somebody got it. Shrinkage is caused by pretty much all concrete shrinks when it sets up through the hydration process. But when they put more water in the concrete, it wants to shrink more, and it's a double whammy, because when you have more water, it shrinks more, which is causes it's more apt to crack, and then just as importantly, the concrete's weaker. So that's why it's
Sorry to interrupt. We have a VW gray vehicle that needs to be moved. Tag 6EZ5250 needs to be moved off from the loading dock.
Well, that's me. Show's over.
All right. No VW, no problem.
All right. So back to shrinkage. Anyway, it shrinks during set and curing. Too much water causes weak concrete, excessive shrinkage. Oh, I went backwards. Oh, and then here's the third one. I'm not too familiar with this technology. Sorry, everybody. And then the third one is stress cracks. And these are good examples of stress cracks. A lot of times they're occurring from the corner of a window, the corner of a wall, and a lot of times beam pockets. So when a customer calls, you can almost direct them where to go as far as where a crack might be in a foundation. And it's good for you to know. I mean, if you're inspecting, your most likely culprits are bottom of windows, corners, underneath beam pockets. And the reason why you have them at the corners of windows is because you have that load that's going above the window. It's carried by the two walls on the side of it, and then they have a sharp corner. Concrete does not like corners at all. So that crack is always going to develop right at that corner. It's a very high stress area. Another typical location of cracks in townhomes are where the homes, basically if you look at a bird's eye view, looking down, you have one property right there and the other one, and they like to offset the homes so that they look a little bit better instead of just having the straight front of all the homes. So they offset them, but when they do that, you have like a T, and that's where, if somebody calls me and they say they're in a townhome, I ask them, is it in a corner, if they're that unit, or is it about 3 or 4 feet back from the front wall? And 9 times out of 10, that's where the crack is in a townhome. So that's a good place to look for them if you're looking for cracks in a concrete foundation. Certain areas, I already covered this, but we're going to look at it now. Corners and intersections. Think of a wall separating the garage from the rest of the basement. You see that there quite often. Beam pockets, sharp corners, higher structural loads. Basement windows, door opening, sharp corners, load transferred to the corners. I've already discussed that. And then water, electric line penetrations. Even though they core a round hole to put either a water line, electric line, sewer, any kind of service line, that still creates enough of a weakness where you may have a crack that emanates off of those. So that's another place that you might see them. And then we already talked about the townhomes. All right. This was actually a home inspector's house. I forgot his name, but this was a home inspector's house that he bought up in Mount Airy. And say again?
Yeah.
So no, this one is not a cold joint. Yeah, it kind of does, but it's not a cold joint. It's you know, they may have backfilled against it too soon and loaded the wall too soon that caused this crack, because walls typically do not crack like this. This is a rare bird. But in this one, you have the double whammy here. It's you see the water that has leaked in the past because you see the rust and the silt that's coming out of the crack. And then also with it being horizontal, it's also a structural. Mostly, if the crack is horizontal, then there's more of a concern of it being structural. This one had a little bit of a bow to it, and it had the horizontal and the water intrusion. So here we go. Is it a structural crack? Most likely, no. Only about, this one is though, but only about 5 to 7% of the cracks out there are structural. So a lot of homeowners, especially first-time homeowners, they lose it. They hear that they have a crack in their foundation. They think their house is falling down, and you know, they just want to walk away from the deal. And but most of these cracks are non-structural in nature, and especially the vertical cracks, which most of them are vertical. They're almost never a structural issue. Ways that I assess if it's, here's a disclaimer. I'm not a structural engineer. I am a civil engineer. That was in my previous career, so I think I know what I'm looking at. But anyway, probably like you cannot assess and say, oh, that's structural, not for legal and licensing reasons. Same with me. I'm not a licensed structural engineer, so I have to be very careful. I will give people pointers, but I won't put it in writing, you know. But for you, when you're looking at it, and if you have some concern, basically what I do is I brush my hand across the crack. If one side protrudes more than the other, an 1/8 inch beyond the other, then there is a concern. You may suggest having a structural engineer assess it. And I see that a lot of times in the reports, because the reports are forwarded to me.
So that's
Yes.
more important than the
Yes, it is. I mean, I've injected some wide crack. Really like 1/2 inch wide. Now I told him, I said I'm a little concerned, but go ahead.
Don't forget our remote audience can't hear the questions from the peanut gallery.
Okay. You want me to repeat them if they ask? Okay. Okay, no worries. So anyway, you rub your hand across it, and if one side is offset, then there's some concern about it. You can see how one side is settled more than the other. It's offset a little bit. How to find them. Now this is not how to find a structural crack. This is how to find all cracks. You know, we're all getting older, and I have to tell you, I try to find the easiest way to find these cracks without bending over and killing myself and crawling around. You look outside. Typically, the cracks are vertical. This one's pretty obvious. The basement's unfinished. It's easy to go in there and take a look at it. If it's finished, then it's a guessing game. But I'd say about 95% of the time or more, if you see the crack on the outside, the crack is going to go all the way through the wall because concrete doesn't magically bend. So I've only been to one house where we saw the crack on the outside and we couldn't find it on the inside. And it wasn't patched or repaired. It was an anomaly. So, but almost all the time you'll see the crack on the inside as well. You look inside, if the basement area is not finished. Corners, as we discussed before, especially where there's division wall between garage and basement T areas, beam pockets, and this could be a beam pocket. You know, if you walk along the side of the house and you see a crack about halfway if it's a smaller house, larger houses will have 2 sets of beams going across them. But if you see it like midway, pretty confident it's a beam pocket that caused that crack. at the bottom corners of windows. And this is where it helps out a lot. If they do have a finished basement and they see water coming in, but they see no crack on the side or on the front or back, I ask them before I go out there, look in the window well and see if you can see a crack. I mean, it can be just a tiny little crack in that corner, and that's a lot of times the culprit. And then at the bottom of sliding door, entry door, rear of the house, and walkout basements. Okay, what do you do if insulation is on the wall? And I have a question for everyone here. Is it code to have insulation on these walls nowadays in the basements?
New work.
Say again?
In new work.
Okay. And does it have to go all the way down to the bottom, or is there?
9-foot ceiling in the basement, 4-foot blankets, horizontal.
That's to go to, I think, like a foot below frost.
Okay.
A foot below frost.
Okay, all right. That's for my own knowledge. I was kind of curious. Okay, this is what I do. If say you're outside, you're at an inspection, you see the crack on the outside. Fortunate enough that the basement's unfinished, but it does have the insulation on the wall. You don't have to bend over and start picking all that up. I always go high. Everybody here carries a small ladder. I just have a little step stool ladder that tall. And all you do is you kind of pace it off on the outside, go inside, pace it off. You don't have to pull out a tape measure. And then you just crawl up on your ladder and just pull that insulation down. I try not to disturb it if I don't have my mask on. So you just gently do it, and you only pull it down a little bit, and you'll most likely see that crack. Another thing is it might be on the next, slide. Cracks are almost wider and easier to spot at the top of the wall. I don't have any definitive reason why they are wider. My guess is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody else knows the answer to this, is that at the bottom, the wall is pinned to the footer. It can't move as much. At the top, it can move and shrink and pull away a little. That's the only theory I can come up with as to why the cracks are wider at the top. But most of the time, they are wider at the top, so it's easier to find them at the top anyway. And many times, the crack will be, say, 1/8 inch, 3/16 of an inch at the top, and by the time you get to about 2 feet from the floor, it's non-existent. It's disappeared. So you always go high, pull that insulation down a little bit, and you should be able to see it. And then also, if you see a water stain or crack on the outside, then pull the insulation a few inches, and you should be able to spot it. All right.
Another clue is the water bugs.
Another clue is pill bugs or other water-loving bugs. You'll often see bug carcasses at the bottom of a crack. So if you don't see a crack, but you see a pile of bug carcasses, somewhere nearby, there's probably going to be a crack.
That's good to know. All right, the types of repair. You have epoxy versus urethane versus sealing on the outside. Epoxy, I would say not even anymore, it's not even 5% of the repairs are epoxy. About 30 years ago, epoxy was king. When it was first developed, everybody, the thought was epoxy strong. Say it's 9,000 PSI, concrete's anywhere from 3,000 to 4,500 PSI. But that strength is only in compression, pushing it together. In tension, epoxy is just as pitiful as concrete is, thus the rebar in the concrete. So anyway, everybody was sold on epoxy being, oh, it's super strong, yay, we're going to use it, and they did use it. And I do quite a bit of repairs re-injecting an epoxy injection from anywhere from 20 years ago to a couple years ago. So epoxy really has waned because the benefits are very limited with epoxy. So Any questions on epoxy?
Yeah, let me ask you a question.
Yeah,
Use the mic.
I'll repeat it. Well, I can repeat it just to keep going,
The-
yeah.
The question that I have, once the epoxy is already in the crack and it re-cracks and you come back to fix it, it's actually contaminated by the epoxy, so what do you actually do?
Okay, the question was, once if the crack was previously injected with epoxy and it's re-cracked and now it's contaminated with the epoxy, how do you repair that? So a previous repair, whether it's epoxy or urethane, I strip away the surface seal and then I drill in through the epoxy, trying to, in an attempt to get behind the epoxy. And I also put about a third more ports in there to ensure I have a good injection. But short of tearing down the wall, which that's not an option, you can't route that out. It'd be just too destructive. So that's how I address that.
Is that repair more expensive than if there was no epoxy there?
Yes, very, yeah. I mean, it's.
A lot more.
It's at the end we'll talk about pricing, but it adds about 40%. It's usually double the work, almost double the material that you're dealing with, and I charge about 40% more for a previous repaired crack. Here we go. The pros are strong, but not necessarily a structural repair. And that one right there with the structural repair, a lot of times I have to discuss it with with a structural engineer or a realtor or somebody who has it in their head that, hey, we want epoxy. And I try to talk them out of it, not because it's not really much harder to inject with epoxy. It's just, I don't feel that it's the proper repair. Plus it's more expensive than injecting with urethane. So that's why there's so few of them. Cons are they may open up again, may let water in, only as strong as the interface between the epoxy and the existing concrete. So not only is it weak, but in that crack, think about it, if you see a crack and you have silt on the wall, it's evidence that silt has come in over time. So that means you have silt, you have dust, you have moisture, all that, which inhibits the bond between the epoxy and the in situ concrete. So even if that thing didn't want to split apart on its own, it's going to split at that interface because it's a weak interface where that epoxy goes in. So it will not stitch that wall together as much as people really want it to, because they don't want to go to the more extreme repairs. It won't do it. And then my attitude is, if the rebar didn't stop the crack, the epoxy is not going to stop it either. Urethane. That's about 95% of the injections that I perform are urethane injections. Urethane has no strength ability whatsoever, and it's never a claim that it does, but it's wonderful in stopping water from coming in. The urethane, it's a polyurethane material. It's activated by water, and it also it remains flexible throughout the life of the structure. So it really is ideal for stopping water from coming in. Pros are, it's flexible, will stop the water, will stop water even if the wall moves, and it expands into every crevice. Protects the rebar from future corrosion and rust. And the cons are, as I said, no structural integrity. Now, I have this little, everybody may have seen this in the, when we come to the other meetings, but I made a little mock-up. I don't know if everybody can see this online.
They can see it.
Okay, made up a little mock-up. I took a brick on one side that simulates the concrete, and then I have plexiglass over on this side. And actually, this mock-up is like 25 years old. I hate to admit it, but I mean, it kind of shows you how everything has maintained its integrity over the years. And then I put some rebar in there to show the rebar in a typical repair. And as you can see, I'll quit moving around so quickly. As you can see, the urethane if this is the inside of the wall, this is the outside, it goes all the way through, comes to the outside, and then fills up the crack, and it encapsulates the rebar so that if water ever wanted, before this was repaired, water was coming in, hitting the rebar, you have some moisture, some oxygen, it starts to rust right where that crack is and weakens it. I don't tell people, hey, your house is going to fall down if you don't inject this, no scare tactics like that. But you want to give everything a fighting chance, if possible. So it is an added benefit to inject this to prevent the rebar from rusting in the future. Here's a few pictures of different cracks that have been injected. Let me see what's coming up next. That's an exterior one again. Okay. Types of repair: continued epoxy versus urethane versus sealing on the outside. And in this one, so we've gone over epoxy injection, urethane injection. The urethane and epoxy injections, I do provide a life of structure warranty against it ever leaking again, even with epoxy. But if it did spring a leak after you use epoxy, I would only inject it with urethane after the fact. But it's a non-issue because nobody injects with epoxy anymore. So anyway, we have epoxy, urethane, and then the third one is, it's more of a cosmetic repair on the outside. And if you see this crack there, I mean, that's what it looked like before. The one to the right, it's harder to see it in there, because what I do with this is I dig down about 6 inches. I make no false claims that, hey, this is going to seal up your crack, it's going to stop water from coming in, whatever. But a lot of times on a home inspection report, they say address the crack, and I give the realtor, I give the realtor and the home seller and buyer options here. And if there's no evidence of moisture on the inside, some of them will opt for a more cosmetic repair, which it does have some benefit. It'll stop a driving rain, it'll stop some bugs from coming in, and hopefully stop a little bit of freeze thaw above grade. But other than that, there's no warranty saying that it'll stop water from coming in from below grade. And that is where the majority of water comes in. But a lot of people don't want to tear down perfectly good drywall if there's no evidence of moisture. And I really can't blame them. I'd have a tough time doing it myself. So, okay. So sealing the outside only. Does a crack go through the wall? As I explained at the beginning, most likely it does go through the wall. When we do this I call it a grind and seal. Use this when there's no evidence of water intrusion. One of my tricks, and probably yours as well, pull up the carpet, look at the carpet strip, the wood carpet strip, that medieval looking strip that has the nails sticking up. Anyway, and look and see if that has staining on it. And if it doesn't, chances are it's never leaked. And then use when there's a very minor hairline crack. That one's a little bit more than minor, but there's no evidence of moisture. Or a lot of times you use it if there's a garage there, because there's no chance of water coming in the basement. So they want to seal the crack. You do the grind and seal. It's less expensive, and it placates the home buyers. And I don't know if this is going to, here we go, the process. Process of the grind and seal, at least for me, is I have a V-shaped diamond tip grinder, and I just grind along that crack, then I vacuum it out, clean it out, brush it out. Then I lay in a polyurethane sealant. It's not caulk. You don't buy it at Home Depot. It's a higher industrial grade material, and I think it looks pretty good. It has a little bit of sand in it, so it kind of matches the texture. And I have about 8 colors, so as you can see, it color matches to an extent. Let's see what this is. The injection process. Now this process applies to either urethane or epoxy. Doesn't matter. It's the same process. First one is you clean out the crack, and then you determine the locations to inject. So on the left side, you can see, I don't know if everybody can see, I'm trying to stay out of the way, typical crack coming off the corner of a window. You see the water staining from down below about 2 or 3 feet, up from the floor. And so what I do is I wire brush off the surface of the crack, any kind of debris. And then a lot of people think that I drill into the crack or drill beside it to inject. And I very rarely drill into the crack. I have the hammer drills on the truck. It's not that I'm being lazy. It actually takes a little bit more time to clean out the crack. I use some little knives and things like that, and I pick at it to ensure that I have the most direct path for the injection material to go in that crack. So typical wall that's 8 feet tall, I'll have about 20 to 22 ports on that wall. And so brush it off, clean out the spots, mark them, and then you can see, it's kind of tough to see, maybe this will show you. And then I inject, then I attach the ports to the wall. These plastic ports stay in place. And these are just glued onto the wall with epoxy. And then you seal over the base of them and the crack itself with 2-part hard epoxy. That's a surface seal. It's not the same material that you would inject. And then on the outside, whatever is above grade, you have to seal with the epoxy, the 2-part hard epoxy. And that's the third shot there. That's the 2-part hard epoxy on the outside as well. Because this material really will go all the way from the inside to the outside. And if you don't seal this, it'll just spill out, make a mess on the outside, and you won't have a good fill all the way up to the top of the crack. So, and I did inject this one and started down there, and I kept injecting, and then till it starts coming out the next port, then you inject in there. And then I left a little hole at the top to simulate what the top of the foundation looks like, and the material just starts spilling out the top, and that's when you know that you have a full, complete injection. Okay, the ports, now I'll just go through some of the details. Ports are typically spaced 4 to 10 inches. Narrower the crack, it's harder to inject, the ports are closer. If it's a wider crack, you can spread your ports out a little bit more. Attach the ports to the wall, seal over the crack with 2-part hard epoxy, seal over the exterior, inject from the bottom up, filling the entire crack.
Question.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of repairs, and on an 8-foot wall, typically I'll see 4 ports, which, from what I just heard, is not anywhere close.
Yep. And the reason for that, very good question. The reason for that is they hired somebody that's not doing it properly. And a lot of times that is the home builder that has done that repair, because all they're trying to get through is their warranty period with that. And it's very, it's not a good repair. And those are the ones I have to go back to, and not I have to, but I go to and inject.
So a foot between ports is about pushing it?
Pushing it, yeah. Yep. So, and just like anything else, it takes more time, more money to put more ports on the wall, but I never go back, knock on wood with it's easy to offer the warranty if you don't have to service it, so, it's great. So life and structural warranty, but I don't have to go back because I'd rather add more ports to it and ensure that what you're really looking for is a term I use is walking. You're looking for this material to walk from this port to that port. Then you've had a good injection.
So if we see this type of repair in a basement, what should we be telling our clients?
What should you, first thing you say, did the crack man do it or not? No, I'm kidding. When you say see this type of repair, are you meaning with only like a foot spacing?
Just any kind of crack that's obviously been injected with something. It's been repaired. What should we tell our clients to either look for or ask for?
Okay. The first thing is you should not be worried when you're inspecting if the crack, if this epoxy has a little hairline crack along it, because we all know these walls will continue to move over time. So allay those fears right away here's the caveat, if it's been injected with urethane, because the urethane will flex with that. If it's been injected with epoxy, it's pretty much been breached. The repair has been breached. Not saying it's going to leak, because it may have never leaked in the past, or something else occurred that changed the situation. So let me finish with what's telling. So I'd look to see if how far the ports are spaced, and I'm not out to scare anybody. It should be fine, unless there's evidence of moisture coming in, then I really wouldn't worry about it too much.
Other than it will look much neater than normal and have more ports than normal, how would we identify one of your repairs?
I put a sticker on mine. Yeah. So
That's easy, because I've never seen one of your stickers.
So I take an extra step when I do it. I do like cauterize the surface. I don't just put on the epoxy. I go with a torch and a trowel, and I cauterize it. And the reason I do that more, it forces you to take a second look at it before it's too late, to make sure you don't have any pinholes for the material to shoot out when you're injecting it. So mine are typically smoother looking. They're not all buttered up like a frosting on a cake. They're smoother, and I'll have the sticker, and sometimes you'll see them with the nails in them. I never use that's like old school. So it's this wider port, and I mean, I look at them all day long. I know what my repair looks like, but to the average person, it's probably tougher to tell. But it's just a neat job with closer ports and the sticker, And then you can see, here's some good examples. Here is a previous repair. This isn't me. You can see the staining right there. That one over there, especially a previous repair, you can see it's like a pink or salmon colored epoxy. I've never had that color, but you can see how it's failed, and see the staining on the wall, and actually the staining on the floor as well. Okay, we kind of covered this already, but what if the crack is previously repaired? If no evidence of moisture leaking, then the repair should suffice, as mentioned a couple of minutes ago. If evidence of moisture, then crack needs to be re-injected. Additional cost to remove the previous repair. Now we're moving on to some other special situations, which are waterline penetrations. Okay. Water electric line penetrations, these are all examples of a water line penetration. If evidence of moisture or leaking, injection is required. And that one really kind of shows what's going on. It shows all the staining from the soil over time.
Question for you.
Yes.
As a part of your practice, do you clean off the water stains once you get done with the repair so the homeowners can monitor your fixes?
I typically do. Now, I'm not going to sandblast or something like that, but I take my wire brush and I do clean it off. It only takes a couple minutes, and plus it makes the job look a little bit neater. So. Let me go back. Oh, snap. Let me go back. Here we go. Let's talk about these a little bit more. Now,
excuse me for one second, just because I don't want to change the subject. But when you're injecting a regular wall, how do you know if it's an 8-inch wall, 10-inch wall, or a 12-inch wall? Because your cost is going to vary.
I don't know, and I've never really been too concerned about it.
Okay.
I guess it's like everything else in life. Sometimes you're ahead of the game. Sometimes you're not ahead of the game. So I really haven't been. I don't know.
Okay, so you're relying, when you're below grade and you're injecting, you're relying on the earth, on the backfill, to kind of dam up your material.
Yep.
And does that port, when you're injecting in an 8-inch or 10-inch port, whatever it may be, are you waiting for it to come back in through?
Yes, and that's what I was, sorry if I wasn't clear on that, yes, but the soil below grade acts as a barrier, stops the material. And when I'm injecting in this port, this lower port, I'm not even looking at this, I'm looking at this one. I'm waiting for it to start to start coming out of this one.
Didn't you ever get any that blow out on the backside?
The only way I have yes, I have, because if I'm on the outside and if I don't have a perfect seal, and keep in mind, a lot of times they have that textured brick look on the outside. If I don't have a perfect seal, I will have a blowout there, but I try to prevent that because it
But
looks
below grade.
below grade.
Yeah, you could have a blowout, a void in the dirt, right? And just keep filling it up with material.
Yeah, that's what I do. I keep pumping it until it starts coming out the next port up, and it just
Okay.
you'll have an extra plug of material out there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So, along those lines, we're looking at these now, so it's a good time to talk about it. I had a job, it was weird, talking about, having a bunch of material coming out. I was injecting a sewer line, about this big around the sewer, the annular area. And I pumped in boatloads of material, and now I start to worry, did I breach the sewer line? Am I filling up these people's sewer line? Like, and then not all of a sudden, about 10 minutes into the injection process, tube after tube going in there, I started seeing the wall below, see where that stain is? And this was up high. About that far down, the wall below just started oozing the urethane material. I thought it was like the Amityville Horror, how the wall started like, what the? And it's because, and if you think about it, they have that 4-inch line with maybe a sleeve in the wall, and they dumped the concrete in there. They didn't get vibrated around the bottom side. So you had basically honeycomb underneath it, but the surface looked really smooth. You couldn't see the honeycomb on the surface. And that's what really, I was at the beginning when I first started doing it. It really sold me on how this material traveled about 2 or 3 feet down and started coming out the bottom part of the wall. So it goes in there, it expands, it finds every nook and cranny, and really does fill the void.
Said how long between openings it starts to lose up. Everything is perfect. You sealed in the back and on the ports.
When I'm injecting this,
Yeah.
if it's a very tight crack, it takes a little bit longer, but it could take anywhere from 2 or 3 seconds to start coming up, or it can take up to a minute. And then if you're worried about it not penetrating all the way through, keep in mind I've already had it walk up here, and then I start injecting this more, so then it's backfilling into there more and continues to fill up. So. Now, with the waterline penetrations, I don't know if I don't have a good representation, but on that far one over there, you have a carrier pipe. You have to be careful, at least I'm careful, is I inject, you have the water line, then you have the carrier pipe around it. I inject that annular area between the carrier pipe and the service line, whether it's sewer or whatever, and then I also, this is where I pull out the drill. I'll drill around that carrier pipe, because that can be a conduit on the outside of it as well. And I inject that as well. So it's kind of like 2 donuts of injection to ensure that it never leaks again. So. Oh, I messed it up. I guess I'll use this. There we go. Okay, special. How much more time do I have, Hollis?
Yeah, as much time as you want.
Oh, geez. Okay.
We'll be here till midnight.
Special instances continued. Obviously, you can see there's horizontal cracking, concern about structural issues, and then you can see the carbon fiber strap. So we'll get to this. Wall ties. Sometimes they leak. Everybody's familiar with wall ties, I take it, right? So, and actually, wall ties sometimes add enough weakness that the crack is going to follow along those wall ties. It's, you wouldn't think that little bit, but it's that concrete's looking for the weakest spot to crack, and sometimes that's where they'll propagate from. Honeycomb. Everybody's seen honeycomb, I take it? So
Back to your wall ties.
yes.
The reason it cracks at wall ties is the wall ties are made out of low-grade steel. it rusts, just like lintels over windows, and rust expands.
Yep.
And the expansion of rust is extremely strong. So the best defense about wall tie rusting is a good layer of paint before it rusts.
Honeycomb is the next one. I inject honeycomb as well. I don't know of anything else that would really be any better than injecting honeycomb. I guess, yeah, I mean, I do it all the time. That's priced up by the square foot and how massive the honeycomb is. But when I do it, that's when I bring out the hammer drill, and it's kind of like the guessing game. You can see the honeycomb, but then I go around the perimeter farther to make sure that you finally get into some solid concrete, and then to err on the side of caution, you over inject it just to make sure you have a good fill. Honeycomb is caused by poor vibration, cold joints, and proper placement. You must seal the entire surface, just like worrying about the outside. If I'm doing a honeycomb area this big, that whole area has to be sealed with the epoxy. Floor cracks. Me personally, I don't worry about them too much. They're not a structural member of the house. You'll never be able to seal the entire floor. You cannot hermetically seal a floor. They are meant to float independent of the wall. If they didn't float independent of the walls, it'd add more stress to the walls, which creates more grief down the road. It just doesn't make sense. But cracks in the floors, they may indicate differential settlement, which could point you towards a wall crack. I'm not saying it will, but if you're really stumped and you see moisture coming in, you start with a floor crack. It might lead you to it. A lot of people call me panicking about floor cracks, and it's like, what would you do? And maybe I'm the worst business person in the world. I say nothing. I mean, especially realtors, they go, and I just tell them yeah, I can seal the crack along the floor, but it's like the whack-a-mole game. It'll start coming up somewhere else, so it's just pointless.
Well, it's not a structural issue, but a crack in a slab can allow water to bubble up from underneath, and it can also allow radon gas to penetrate. So I usually do recommend that they get sealed just to prevent, radon intrusion. I
understand the radon intrusion, but I'm also trying to walk a fine line. I don't want to be the person who says, accuses me of just like using scare tactics just to build have more business. So, if somebody else recommends, because of radon, I'm glad to seal it. But I just don't like scaring people, and I don't want them thinking that I'm ripping them off. So I'm very cautious about that. But as far as sealing them to stop the water from coming up, as I was explaining, the problem with that is that if this is the crack right there, and then you have a crack along the wall where it's moving independently. If I stop it here, it's just going to go down another foot or two and start bubbling up again. So I very rarely inject. I've had people beg me, like, inject this floor for me, and it's not going to work. I mean, you're wasting your money. Yeah. So I've done a couple of them. But it's just not a good idea. And then just sealing it, yeah, I can stop it. I'll stop it just by sealing, because the pressure is relieved by going 2 feet down the wall, and it'll start coming up there. So it doesn't, for me, it doesn't serve the customer unless they're worried about radon or they aesthetically they don't like it.
Trying to suppress the water from the inside doesn't often work.
No. And that's the beauty of the injection, because I'm not doing it, it's going all the way through to the outside. And actually some basement waterproofing companies now, they do not inject, they try to upsell by putting carbon fiber over it. And they're allowing that water to come all the way onto the inside. And I've had salespeople say, why don't you just do that? It's an upcharge. You can charge them more. And I'm like, it's not the right thing to do because we're not protecting this rebar and we're not stopping the water on the outside. Okay, horizontal cracks, sometimes considered structural, but they're really not that typical in concrete. You see them a lot in cinder block, but you don't see them, at least I don't see them too often in concrete. We discussed this already, the crack is offset. If you brush your hand across it, it's an indication. I usually suggest they call a structural engineer, unless they want to listen to what I have to say. Carbon fiber. I avoided carbon fiber for the longest time. I wasn't sold on it. I'm really conservative. I was like, does this really work? And I had so many people ask me for it. And the alternatives are crazy expensive. So I do them now, and I've never had a callback on one. So apparently it works. I did learn that not all carbon fiber is created equally. So some of these less expensive kits probably are not worth it. So I go with a good name brand for that. This picture here, the far one is literally stitching together with carbon fiber staples. And what you do is you drill in on each side of the crack, and then you route out the concrete, and then you lay in, I should have brought a staple, I didn't bring one. You lay in a staple, you epoxy that in with a different type of epoxy. It's not the surface seal epoxy, it's a structural epoxy. And that will literally staple the wall together. So that's an example of that. Where to use? Basically, where known structural issue exists, remember only about 5% are structural concerns. Where there is evidence of continued movement, you'd want to use it there. And it's tough for an inspector to determine during one visit. If previously repaired and the epoxy surface sealant is cracked, then you may consider it, especially on a horizontal one. Still, even if you don't see evidence of moisture and you have a crack and you're going to put the carbon fiber on it, I still recommend injecting for the reasons we talked about earlier. It protects the rebar and the wall. And you have to do this before you apply the carbon fiber. Types of carbon fiber. Carbon fiber staples, we discussed that right there. Carbon fiber strips, that's an entire strip that is adhered to and over the full length of the crack. And here's a progressive shot. That's it drilled out. That shows you them sealed up at the bottom, and then that shows them placed in the epoxy up towards the top. And then the carbon fiber straps are going perpendicular to keep that wall from bending in.
You mentioned earlier that you don't know if a crack is structural or not for sure. So do you ever do carbon fiber just to ensure that, or do you ever recommend to use carbon fiber to ensure that you may be helping resolve a structural issue?
Once again, maybe maybe I'm a bad business person, but I typically don't push it. And my experience has been, because I've injected many horizontal cracks without adding carbon fiber to it, and I've never had a callback on one of those. So they either are done moving or it's not that much of an issue. Believe me, if somebody says, hey, I'm really concerned about this, will you put carbon fiber on? Well, yeah, I mean, bring it on. But I don't push people to do it. My experience has been that the cracks have held that I've repaired with just the injection process. And then they're typically spaced about 4 feet on center. And the process, it's a pretty labor-intensive process to do it right. It's pretty easy if you don't want to do it right. But just like everything else, painting, whatever you do in life, if you don't prep it, it's not going to hold. So the hardest part about this is you have to grind the concrete down to get a nice surface profile. And that requires a grinder made for concrete and also a HEPA vac to keep, because that dust is crazy. And the HEPA vac, so there's a lot more to it. And then once you do that, then you vacuum off the strip, you put the epoxy on. The carbon fiber, I don't know if you can see it, but then it's screwed into the the toe board, is that called the toe board or header? Top plate. All right. Screwed into the top plate there, and then at the bottom, it's you actually drill a rather large hole into the floor, and you twist that in just to get it out of the way and tuck it in underneath the slab.
That would be a sill plate.
Sill plate. And then you can see the cracks have been injected prior to it, and then you install the carbon fiber strips. Already went through this. Why have I started doing it in the last 5 years? I've seen many epoxy injections fail, and I assume it's due to weak adherence inside the crack where dust, debris, moisture, silt have accumulated over time. And then with doing carbon fiber versus injecting epoxy in, I can control the surface prep of the interface where the bond is made. Essentially, you can grind and prep a groove in the wall or the wall surface to ensure proper adhesion, where injecting and hoping that the epoxy will hold it together, you don't have any of those benefits.
So there's a comment from the remote audience that's suggesting that something that we all, I think you've agreed to, is that that your injections are primarily about controlling water.
Yes.
But there's a suggestion that the carbon fiber is also only about controlling water. Do you agree with that?
I disagree with that. And the reason, this was brought up to me by a salesperson once. I was ordering some urethane material, and they said, well, why aren't you using the carbon fiber? You know, nobody's doing the, they said not too many people do the injection process, because there is a little bit of an art to inject. You have to have a feel for it and kind of you have to know what's going on. It's tough to find good labor nowadays. Actually, speaking of that, I do all my injections myself. I don't farm anything out. So from beginning to end, I take care of the injections. But anyway, the carbon fiber, if it's just put over the wall and glued to it, it allows all that water to come in and push against that carbon fiber. And it probably will stop the water from coming in, but you're allowing it to hit this rebar. You know, if you're above the frost line, that water's going in there. You have the freeze thaw, which expands it over time. I personally have had very good success with, you fill the whole thing from front to back, bottom to top, and then you don't have to worry about it.
So the next comment from our remote audience is about the failures of the epoxy, suggesting that an epoxy failure is due to movement, not a failure of the material itself.
I would agree with that. Yeah, it's due to the movement, it's due to tension, and I guess it could be both. The movement causes it to fail. It can fail at either the interface or it can fail. And I don't have a microscope out. All I know is it failed and it doesn't work. But it's epoxy strong, but in tension, it's weak like concrete. No, there's none. There's no flex. Oh boy. Now she's really going off the deep end. Like resets it. All right. Okay, another reason carbon fiber, if you have a structural issue, is carbon fiber is made for tension. It is superior in tension. Concrete is very weak in tension. Cost for carbon fiber, now we're starting to get the cost. To do one strip, I wrote this up a couple years ago. It's more than that now, but it's $1,100. Right now, it's about $1,200 a strip. I guess some other companies would do it for less, but I would question their prep and the quality of the materials, because it all comes down to the prep. And then it starts getting expensive, because then if you have a 16-foot wall, you're putting 5 of those in, you're talking almost $6,000 right there. but it is a lot less expensive than, you know, putting the tiebacks and things like that, I guess. All right, here's that same, kind of like showing you how the process went, you know, for that one job. You know, there was the ugly crack, there's the injections, there's the prepping, the measuring for the carbon fiber, and then there's the carbon fiber glued on. And then, Bob, you asked how you tell my crack. You can see the little sticker right there. Okay, injection costs and warranty. We're getting down to the end. How about that? Typical crack is $800 for urethane for 8 linear feet. That's the typical wall height. That's why I price it up at the 8-foot mark. Epoxy injection is typically $900 for 8 feet. Previous repair, you add up to $300. That answers your question for previous repair. Provide multiple crack discounts, of course. You know, just like I'm in the inner city, right? You know, you buy more crack, it's cheaper. Water electric line penetration, they're approximately $700. It seems like the water lines, there's not as much work, but on the flip side is you're using a lot of times there is a void. It's washed in a bunch of material. There's a larger void, you're pumping in much more material into it. Warranty, life of structure, it's fully transferable to subsequent homeowners. The warranty is against it leaking again. As I said, this might open up over time, but it doesn't affect the warranty. The repair is through the wall, right in there. And on the warranty, we don't even put the homeowner's name on the warranty because they don't have to go through any transfer issues or whatever. It just has the property address and what we did. Here's some basically exterior work. I do some of this. You can see where that beam pocket has popped that off. It's really tough to drill in rebar sideways, but I do the best I can. Put some rebar in there, some wire, and then that's the finished product there. This is a crack in the brick veneer to try to make it look as neat as possible. I taped it off with some duct tape, so it's, you know, I think it looks nice and neat when it's done. Here's a corner on stairs. I was able to drill in, put some rebar in there to hold it, and then that's the finished product up there. Repairing that, it's formed up and.
What does that one run? What do you? I see that quite a bit. What might I tell?
The front porch corner.
What
That
might I tell people that would cost?
I don't want to do them anymore. No, I'm kidding. They're a lot of work. I don't think I'd do one for less than $1,000 now. You know, and I'd have to see the pictures to see.
It's really common.
Yeah, to see what I'm getting into. So.
Just a railing pole that's built on uphill.
Yeah. Yep. Estimates. I give free estimates over the phone or over the internet. It's quite convenient in this day and age. Everybody takes digital photos. They send them to me. I can say that I've never come in and it's been the costs have been more. I'm very conservative in my estimates. And also, once you get above 8 feet, there is a discount in price, so it's about 30% off. So say the first 8 feet is $800. Each linear foot after that is about $70 a linear foot. So there's really no guessing game when you're quoting somebody. It's like, hey, if you want to measure in advance, I'll give you the exact price. But they say, oh yeah, it's like 10, 12 feet, and I give them that, and it's usually right there with it. And the famous one is, oh, it's only 3 or 4 feet long, right? But they don't bother lifting up the insulation. I said, I don't think your crack's 3 or 4 feet long. And just so you know, the $800 is a minimum price for the cracks. Even if it's 4 feet long, which is rare, it's still $800. Cracks are quite standard, which makes it pretty simple to quote it. Digital photos are tremendous help. Always conservative pricing, no upselling. And thank you, everyone.
I got a quick question for you. What's the propellant, the vessel you use, and like the nozzle tips? And do you have to clean those, or are they single use?
They're single use. So the propellant is these guns right here. No, I'm kidding. The propellant is you don't want to have a big, heavy machine for crack injection. Now, if you're working on the subway system and you're pumping gallons, then you have some kind of hydrodynamic pump. But for me, it's a 2-cartridge system. The beauty of polyurethane, it's activated by water. So even if there's water inside that crack, it will still set up. And it's pretty amazing. As long as I can get the surface seal, the epoxy on the wall, I'm golden. A thunderstorm, and it's happened. Thunderstorm can come rolling in, and I have water, thank you, starting to roll out of these ports before I inject it. I still keep going because it's activated by water. And if I'm injecting down here, it literally starts pushing the water out of this one up above. And then when you start seeing the polyurethane coming out, then you know you filled the whole thing and you keep walking up. So it's a 2-part system using a 2-part gun. That's the propellant, and it's they come in like 18-ounce dual cartridge tubes.